Everybody has a story, and every story needs to be heard. On this podcast, we are talking with each member of the General Conference Leadership Council. I'm your host, Alyssa Truman, and this is ANN Profiles. Today, I'm here with Gideon Mutero. He is a Vice President for Hope Channel International. Welcome, Gideon.
Thank you.
I got your last name right?
Yeah, you did.
With the pause between the starting of the podcast and that, I was really making sure I got it right. Where is your name from?
From Kenya.
Kenya.
From the central region of Kenya.
Okay, so I guess we've already started because now I know where you're from. So we like to always start this off a little bit with just kind of like, who are your parents? Where are you from? So tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I grew up in a pastor's family. My father, the late Pastor James Mutero, was serving as a pastor in Kenya in various regions, in the coast region, in the western region, in the central region. And eventually he served as a speaker director for the Voice of Prophecy. So I grew up in a pastor's family. Of course, I learned about Adventism in my childhood.
So tell us a little bit about your mother.
My mother, the late Rachel Mutero, was a Bible instructor. And she accompanied my father, of course, in his various postings. And she was a great inspiration to the family, a woman of great faith who nurtured us and inspired us to love God and to serve Him.
You know, it sounds like you had a beautiful foundation kind of to build on. Both your parents were active in the church, active, it sounds like, in sharing their faith.
Right.
So this is in the beautiful country of Kenya.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about Kenya, the place where you were raised, because I think, you know, many of our listeners have never traveled to Kenya. I have actually only ever landed an airplane in Kenya. I don't think that counts as visiting Kenya.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the country and the people of Kenya. What is it like?
Beautiful country. We lived in a few areas, but that was very early in my childhood, so I may not remember all the areas. We lived in the coast region where my father was a pastor. We also lived in the western region. And then while I was probably 3 or 4 years old, we moved to Nairobi, where my father served as a speaker director for the Voice of Prophecy. So I grew up in that mission compound in a place known as Karura, just in the outskirts of Nairobi for most of my life. Beautiful country. You need to visit, not just be at the airport.
I would love to, other than the airport.
Yeah.
So I have 2 more quick questions about the country. Now, for those of us who have grown up in countries like America or something like that, you know, you hear about the wildlife of Africa. Is it as common to see a giraffe or something as it is to see a deer in America or something? What is the wildlife like there?
So I start first by talking about the people because we have wonderful people who live in this country. And of course, it's a country blessed with a lot of other natural resources, the wildlife, for example. You can find most of what we call the big 5.
What are the big 5?
That's the elephant, the lion, the cheetah, the rhino, and the buffalo, I believe.
Okay.
You could find those in many parts of the country, of course, in the game parks where they preserved areas. So beautiful wildlife, beautiful country, but also beautiful people.
Yes. So the other thing is that, you know, many years ago, we're celebrating 150 years of Adventist mission here soon. Americans went all over the world to proclaim the gospel. And we kind of sometimes think of Africa still as a mission field. And there are actually more, like ratio wise, more Kenyans that are Seventh day Adventist to Adventist ratio than there are Americans. Is that correct?
Correct. I believe the membership in Kenya within the two unions now, the East Kenya Union and the West Kenya Union, I believe the membership now is about 1.2 million. I believe that's about the same membership as the North American division.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I'd like to bring this up because I think that sometimes we have a wrong vision of Africa. We still think of it as, and not saying that we shouldn't go there and do stuff, but I'm sure that many of you guys could come over here as you did and help us. But I'd like to help people realize that the Africa maybe that we thought of is not the Africa that is there. It's a very developed country too. It's very technologically developed. Isn't that accurate? I mean, obviously there's portions of it. and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So first of all, Africa is a continent.
Yeah, sorry, I keep saying Africa. It's so true.
It's not.
It is true.
Yeah. It's
Kenya.
a continent, and Kenya is, one of the countries. Yes, it is developed, and there's lots of potential in terms of talent, in terms of contributions that people can make. We have very gifted people there, very committed, people who are very dedicated to serving the Lord. So there's a lot that Kenya could offer.
I agree.
Yeah.
And thank you for the correction because you're
Yeah.
right. And that is something else that Americans do is we
Right.
somehow lump the whole continent together.
Sure.
Kenya.
Yeah.
I went to Tanzania and I was overwhelmed by the beauty of the country, the hearts of the people. And it was probably one of my most favorite experiences that I've had.
Right.
I was just visiting and just seeing the church and the country come alive. So this is where you were born and raised. So you were born and raised in Kenya. Tell us a little bit about your early childhood years. Obviously, we know you were raised an Adventist. What was it like being the child of a pastor?
We lived in a mission compound. We went to an Adventist school. We went to the local Seventh-day Adventist Church that was located on the compound. So as you can imagine, we were in a very sheltered Adventist
It's a bubble.
environment. Yeah, a bubble. And that had its advantages. It helped us grow within that safe environment. But it took learning more as I grew up to actually internalize Adventist doctrines and to make my own decision to not just be an Adventist because I'm a pastor's kid, but to be an Adventist because I believe that the Lord has a special message for his people for the end times, and I need to be part of that movement.
So because you were raised in an Adventist community, were you involved in Pathfinders and like all of that kind of stuff as well?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I was very actively involved in Pathfinders, went through all the various classes.
Are you a master guide?
Eventually became a master guide.
Excellent.
Yes. So, and I must say that one of the things that shaped my life was the discipline that we learned as Pathfinders. I still value those aspects of discipline that have helped to shape me, to make me who I am, and also to shape my career.
What was one of your favorite Pathfinder memories?
I think reciting Bible verses. I was very good at that. I could take some of the longer passages and just the practice and to make sure that I said it right I still keep some of those verses, the memory verses, to date, and
Hmm.
I'm able to recount them to my children and to use them even when we have family worship.
I love that. Pathfinders helping with family worships later on in life.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of Pathfinders. I am also a master guide. So
Wonderful,
Pathfinders shaped
wonderful,
my childhood
wonderful.
as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And I've seen how that translates to your daughters. I've had the privilege of working with them, and I see those values in them. So congratulations.
That is true.
Yeah,
You've actually worked. I have three daughters, and
right.
you've worked with my oldest daughter, Maria, and my second daughter, Riley, this last summer when they were summer interns. So
Absolutely.
they many people have said they've
Yes.
liked working with you, including my daughters. So
Yeah, thank
um
you.
yeah, so Pathfinders is something that kind of often shapes who we are. And I think it's one of those things that helps also lay that groundwork for that faith. So you said that at some point you had to kind of make the faith your own.
Yes.
When in life did that start to happen?
So I was actually baptized when I was 12 years old. At that time, through Pathfinder uh, classes, I had learned a lot about the Bible. I could explain the fundamental doctrines. I had made a determination to serve God for all my life. And that's something that my parents used to talk to us about. My mother, especially, used to remind us that we need to be dedicated, we need to be committed to serving God. Um, and I internalized that, and I have never looked back.
Hmm. So at 12 is when you get baptized and you've decided at 12, I'm going to serve God.
Right.
You don't know what that looks like yet,
Yes.
do you? What
Not
did you
really.
think you wanted to do at 12?
So, after that, I went into secondary school and in a mission school that was far from home, a boarding
Which
school,
school were you at?
Kamagambo Adventist School, which was another experience now away from home. And even though it was an Adventist school, it was now more on I was now more on my own in terms of exercising my faith and continuing to grow. And there were challenges through that period.
Tell us about some of those.
Sometimes getting into bad company and not always doing the things that one is supposed to do, but learning through those mistakes and making a determination to do better and to become um, a more committed servant of the Lord.
Were there any teachers at this academy that kind of stick out to you? Somebody who kind of helped shape you or helped you stay on the narrow path, so to speak?
Yes, we were blessed with wonderful teachers at Kamagambo. We had some missionaries who were very attentive to just helping us grow in our Christian walk. We also had teachers who were strict, very strict, and helped us learn and understand that life requires rigor and discipline, and that we needed to be more, um, uh, more focused on not just our studies, but developing a holistic life, attending to our physical side of life, our spiritual as well as our mental areas. And that holistic education that is offered by Adventist education, as I look back now, it helped to shape me and make me who I am today.
I think it's such an important the holistic thing because it's something we all struggle with. Even us,
Yeah.
we serve and we understand this,
Yeah.
but in today's world it's so hard because you have the push and the pull of work and home and all these things and trying to to keep that holistic balance is such a challenge. But when we find that, it seems to help us be more efficient and effective in everything that we do.
Absolutely. I believe God requires us to look at life holistically. And once we purpose to develop our physical, spiritual, and mental faculties, as well as being socially well adjusted, we are better placed to be instruments in God's hand to serve humanity.
I I love that, and I
Yeah.
totally agree. So, what was one of your favorite experiences at Academy? Do you have anything that just stood out, like a special memory or
Yeah. I enjoyed the evening vespers. I enjoyed the singing, the congregational singing of hymns, and I still recall some of those hymns. One of my most favorite one was Faith of Our Fathers.
Mm.
And being a pastor's kid, it kind of had a special meaning to me. Faith of my father, living still, and even to
You can sing
date.
it if you want.
Oh yeah, well, I'm not a very good singer, but even to date, I'm still inspired by the thought of the faith of our
Mhm.
fathers, the faith of my father. He was not born an Adventist. He had to go through challenging life experiences in his Christian walk to eventually make a determination to follow Christ and to dedicate himself to serving him. And I look at that and say, that faith needs to continue living, not just in me, but I need to pass it on to my children and the succeeding generations.
You know, I love that one of the things that the Adventist Church talks a lot about is our identity. We talk
Right,
about identity and mission,
right,
but our identity is found when we look back in history often. You know, it's my parents, what did they do? These are the things that kind of form who we are.
right,
And as Christians, we also look to our heavenly Father.
right.
And so when our those worlds collide, especially like in your case where your father was a pastor, so he had this relationship with Christ, you were able to see both often through him. And that's a beautiful picture. So I'm also I love listening to people sing. I used
Yeah.
to be in choirs. I'm finding the older I get, I don't think I would ever want to sing just like off
Yeah.
the cuff, but that's okay.
Right.
But I'm a big fan of hymns as well.
Yeah.
And especially when the people singing the hymns
Yes.
really believe the hymns. You know how you can
Yeah.
sing in church and
Yeah.
we're just singing
Yeah.
and then we sing the
Right,
hymns.
right. And then the words have a meaning, and the words become part of your experience as you express yourself in music. So it's not just the singing, but these words kind of get into your consciousness, and you think about them. When you come into certain situations, you remember the words of a certain hymn, and they inspire you and lift you up.
Amen. That's very true.
Right.
So you went away to academy. Were you there for 4 years?
Yes, for 4 years.
For 4 years.
Yes.
How was that at the beginning? I mean, were you very lonely? Because was this your first time being away from your parents?
Yes, it was my first time. I was lonely, not very lonely, because my older brother was a class ahead of me and was already there. So he helped to receive me, and we lived in the same dormitory. So he kind of helped me navigate that. So it wasn't too bad.
That's good.
Yeah.
And you said you had an older brother. Do you have any other siblings?
Yes, I have 5 siblings. Um, I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. So we are 6 of us.
Okay.
And I'm the fourth born, the fourth
Okay.
son. So 4 boys, and then 2 girls after me.
Okay. Oh, wow. So you're kind of like the baby when it comes to boys. So
Yes,
you're like
yes, yes,
you're
yes.
the youngest boy.
Absolutely.
My husband tries to tell me he's the youngest child, but
Yeah.
I'm like, you're not the youngest child, but he was the last boy born. I was like,
Right,
whatever.
right, right.
So when you get done with academy, you're going to have to go on to college, university, wherever it is. Do you kind of know what you want to do at this point? As you're finishing up these high school years, are you like, I'm a numbers guy? Like, tell us a little bit about that part of your journey.
That's interesting. Yes, I had a clear idea of what I wanted to do. I I studied. We used to call it then principles of accounts and commerce. And um, during the holidays, sometimes I would visit my older brother who used to work in the treasury office of the union. And I kind of was impressed about working in that kind of environment. So first of all, I had decided that I would serve God for the rest of my life. So I was thinking of an area where I could serve. And I, I had this impression that probably I could work in the treasury. So once I was done with school, I actually, as we were waiting during the holidays, as we were waiting for the results, I walked up to the local field office that was located in the mission compound where we used to live. And during the holidays, we were just out with other boys, just playing games, ball games, and those
Mhm.
kinds of things. But this one day, I said, let me just walk up to this office and see whether maybe there's something I could do. So I walked up there, went to the treasurer's office, and asked him whether there's an area where I could help. And he looked at me and said, young man, what do you think you can do? I said, well, I have a little knowledge about principles of accounts, and I also studied commerce. Maybe there is something that I could do. So he was gracious enough to find something for me to do. So he gave me an assignment. I still remember what he asked me to do, and he told me, see whether you can do this. And I applied myself to it. Within no time, I had done it and delivered the work to him. And he was quite impressed. And he asked me whether I had time to come more often. And so that's how I started working in the treasury.
I love this. And it actually explains a lot to me about you
Yeah,
because I know that you encourage having summer interns every summer. And
absolutely.
now I understand a little bit more why.
Yes,
Because what I love about what he did was he didn't just say, "Okay, you can make photocopies."
right.
He gave you a challenge
Yes,
and allowed you the privilege to rise up to the challenge.
correct.
And I think we don't often do that with our young people. We either kind of are like, "Okay, here, make the photocopies." We
Yes,
want to
yeah.
give them something safe. It feels
Yeah,
like that they can't mess up.
absolutely. I
Um,
think he was taking a risk, actually, just a boy out of school and assigning them to do something substantive. Actually, the type of work he assigned me was to um, add up the numbers on a trial balance. It used to be done manually at that time. And so I was going to pick account balances from each account and then add up and balance the trial balance. And that's, now it's very easy because the system does
the
it for
computer
you
does it.
as long as you've entered the information. But one of the things that impressed him was the fact that I was very diligent in picking the balances correctly so that I could then be able to add it up. And that aspect of being diligent and keen and careful in what one does has been helpful to me. And I inspire other people to also acquire the same keenness and diligence as they serve. But yes, it's good for us to give the young people in school a chance to express themselves. I am who I am because I got that chance.
Hmm. So this is the summer between high school and university.
Yes.
Okay, so you now know this is your calling.
Right.
So where do you go away to university?
So I went to Daystar University, but not before I had actually worked for some time and also taken some professional accountancy
Okay.
training. Then went off to college, did a bachelor's of business administration degree.
So you did some work and
Yes,
like certificate kind of stuff before
correct.
you went away. What made you decide that path?
So from the time I walked into that office, I think I'd made up my mind that if I got a chance, this is what I want to do. And I've never looked back. So it is something that I had decided I would want to do. And when I got a chance to do it, I applied myself and put all my effort into doing it.
Okay, so you went to Daystar.
University, correct.
Now, is that an Adventist university?
No, it's not an
Okay.
Adventist university, but it is a Christian university.
Okay, and where is that located?
It's in Nairobi.
Okay. So I know that there is a Mrs. in your
Yes,
life.
yes.
Where does she come into your story?
Yeah, very interesting. So I'm done with college. And even while in college, occasionally they would call me to do some tasks in the local field office. Eventually, once I was done, they offered me a job.
Now, which field
an
is this?
accountant's position. Central Kenya field
Okay.
that later became Central Kenya Conference. Actually, by the time I graduated from college, it was Central Kenya Conference. So they offered me a position to serve as an accountant. And same mission compound where I grew up. So very familiar.
You're really not leaving, are you?
Not leaving, very familiar environment. And as I was there serving as an accountant, my father-in-law at the time came to be the principal of the local Adventist school. And he moved into the compound and he was living in a house, 2 houses down the line from where we lived. At that time, I was living with my mom. My dad had passed away, so living with my mom. My other siblings were either at work or in college. So it's me who was actually more or less living with her. And my wife moved to stay with her dad, who was now the principal of the local Adventist school. And so to walk to or to go to their house, the pathway was just in front of our house. So I would see her come in and out. And with time, we got to talk. And as they say, the rest is history.
What does she do?
Right now, she works here at the General Conference with Adventist Risk Management as an underwriter, as an insurance underwriter. But she also is in the business field.
Okay.
And, yeah.
So you guys had a lot to be able to talk and relate to.
Yeah.
All right. So you work for the Central Kenyan Conference.
Correct.
And how many years were you there?
So I was there before, for the period before college. And then after college, I was there for about 5 years.
Okay.
During those 5 years, I served as an accountant. Then I was a senior accountant. And while I was a senior accountant, the treasurer at the time decided that he was leaving for further studies. And so in 1996, they asked me to be treasurer of Central Kenya Conference.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of fun that you started off and you knew exactly where you want to be, and God apparently put it very clearly on your heart what your calling was.
Correct. Although I wouldn't say I was thinking that's how things
We're gonna work.
were going to work. I just wanted to serve, and my desire was to serve as a steward. I had already learned a lot about stewardship principles, and I saw myself as somebody who was walking in partnership with God to serve as his agent in managing his affairs on earth to accomplish his purpose for mankind.
I love that so much.
Right.
It's very clear to me that God gave you the skills, the mentorship, the encouragement that you needed,
Right.
because he had a very particular path. And to me, the most beautiful part was that you were totally willing to go on the path he wanted. And you can see that he's leading you there. So you're now the treasurer
Yes.
of the Central Kenyan
Right.
Conference.
Right.
Where do you go from here?
So first of all, I wouldn't say I was ready. I was quite young at the time. I tried to learn leadership in addition to just doing treasury work. Um, uh, there were good mentors. I remember the union treasurer at the time was a good mentor who kind of helped me understand what was expected of me. So I served in that role for some time. And then after some time, I was invited to serve the East African Union, as they called it at the time. It was the union that covered the entire country of Kenya. And I was asked to serve as associate treasurer.
Now, you brought up an interesting thing there. It's not just that you have to understand accounting to be a treasurer. You also have to understand leadership.
Yes.
And, I think that sometimes we don't think that one through, but
Right.
when we bring in younger people, they might know all the principles, but you still have to understand how to be a leader.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, it was baptism by fire, because here I was working with the pastors and most of the staff who were the age of my parents. So these were really my parents. And I have to interact with them as a leader. I need to be respectful to them, but I also need to guide them. I remember several situations when some of them would come with certain demands or certain requests that could not be fulfilled. And I had to find the right words to respectfully tell them that we are not able to do that, and explain to them why. And some would not understand, what's this young boy telling me? He needs to fulfill my request or my demands. So that was challenging, but it also helped me grow. One of the things that helped me, though, was in all cases, they could see that I had a desire to serve them. And I believe that's something I would advise upcoming treasurers or people who are working with in the treasury work, but leading, that you need to be seen as a servant, as somebody who is keen to assist others. That's really important.
How do you cultivate something like that?
I believe it comes from my upbringing. I never saw my father or my mother serve as bosses. They were always serving people as servants.
Hmm.
And I think I caught some of that from them, and I'm very grateful for the upbringing and the experience that they gave us as we grew up as a children.
When we talk about being a servant, what we're really talking about is like humility. It's you may be in charge,
Right.
but I don't have to lord it over you. I can be
Yes.
humble.
Yes.
And especially I would consider you still young. Um eh, when we work with people who are older than us, there's a lot we can learn from them. And sometimes it can become challenging if you're, you know, in by rank position, you're over them,
Yes.
and recognizing we still can learn from them and maintaining that humbleness because we are only here because God placed us here is so valuable and something I don't think we necessarily always talk about.
Yeah, it is. First of all, is the recognition that when we serve God, we are not serving Him, first of all, necessarily because we are the best or that we know everything.
Very true, because
We
I'm in my position and I don't know everything.
yeah, absolutely. So we need to have a growth mindset, a mindset that recognizes the need to learn. And I consider myself to be an eternal learner. It's been many years now serving in the treasury in various roles, but I'm still learning. There are things that I still struggle with, and I need to learn to become better. So God has not called people to lord it over others. He's called people to serve
Yeah.
others.
So you went to East Africa Union. Did you say that was in Nairobi?
Yes, in Nairobi.
So you finally have left this compound
So
that
I've
you've
left
lived in.
this compound and went into another compound, another mission compound, although the houses where we lived were in a different compound from where the union offices were, but still in an Adventist environment. Um, that was a call into a wider responsibility. This union at the time had 8 fields and conferences and about 9 institutions. It was a
Wow.
huge union, actually. It was the largest union within that division at the time.
So you serve as the associate treasurer
I
for how many
served as
years?
associate treasurer for 2 years, and um, after 2 years, they invited me to be treasurer of the union.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're the treasurer for all of these conferences and institutions
Right.
and helping provide a lot of that mentorship and guidance that was passed down to you,
Right.
to conference treasurers and stuff like that. What would you say is probably one of the things you learned the most during your union experience here?
Actually, there are many things that I learned, and we were going through a very difficult time with the union at the time because these fields and conferences were not doing very well financially. Most of the union institutions were also struggling. We needed to implement certain reforms, I would say, in restructuring some of the ways in which they functioned. Some of them were overemployed, others were overestablished, and there was need to rationalize these the operations of these entities so that they could accomplish mission. And that was not easy because you are basically telling people that they need to cut back in certain areas. You're telling them that they need to adopt more austere measures as far as managing resources is concerned. So that was challenging. But one of the things I learned was if you explain to people what is the ideal, what needs to be done, And if you involve them in finding the solutions, there was no one size fits all for all these organizations. Each area had its unique challenges and required to have its unique solutions. And initially, I did not know that. So we were trying to implement the same things in every area, and we were running into difficulties. The situation improved significantly when we involved the local leaders
Hmm.
in identifying solutions and finding ways in which they could resolve these issues, in their unique settings. And that's a big lesson that I learned during my experience there.
I love that because contextualization, making something work where you are at. I
Correct.
think sometimes we, at the general conference or division or union, we just kind of want to hand down like, here's a program or
Yes.
here, this is the system.
Yes.
But we don't realize that, yeah, it may have worked in this setting, but it will not work in all of these other dozens of settings.
Absolutely.
And we have to take the time to listen
Yes.
and to understand the unique makeup of different areas and then adapt things to make the mission make sense where we are at.
Absolutely. It is a difficult art to learn, and I made many mistakes. I look back and see so many areas where I could have done better. But through the experience, through learning from these mistakes, I would say that it's important to contextualize. And it's even more important to listen to people. You may think you know from the leadership position, and sometimes leaders fall into that temptation of thinking that they know everything, but it always helps to listen.
I love that. So listen
Yes,
and then contextualize.
absolutely.
All right. So you serve for East Africa Union, right?
Yes.
Okay. I was like trying to
Right.
remember the name of it now.
Yeah,
Right. So you
you're
served
right.
East Africa Union. How
Yeah.
many years were you the treasurer?
So I was treasurer for 2 years.
Okay.
And at the end of that period, the General Conference had made a decision to restructure the divisions in Africa and actually establish a new division. So we were under the Eastern Africa Division that was based in Harare, Zimbabwe. And the General Conference made a decision to establish a new division, the current East Central Africa Division, that would be based in Nairobi, Kenya. So while I was treasurer of East African Union, the division asked me to be involved in preparing the establishment of the new division. They wanted me to be involved in searching for property where the new division would be located. They wanted me to be involved in establishing some of the logistics that would be necessary to establish a new division. And so while serving as treasurer of the union, I had that assignment that brought me into the new East Central Africa Division in its formative stages. And when the division was organized during the organization division council, I was asked to serve as associate treasurer for the division.
So you stay in the same city though?
I stay in the same city, but now different location for the office. The division had some property in another part of the city, and that's where the division was initially located.
Okay. So why do we restructure divisions? So I know that's not necessarily a life story, but you're very intimately involved in this. And I know that,
Correct.
there's always something new. It kind of seems like happening.
Yeah.
What leads to those kind of decisions?
I think efficiency for mission. The General Conference considered the configuration of the divisions at the time. We had the Eastern Africa Division and the Afro, I believe they called it the one that covered the Western Africa. I think it was Afro mid.
I don't know.
I don't.
This could become a game show.
No. Sorry, I remember now. Africa Indian Ocean Division.
Okay.
Indian Ocean Division. That division covered mainly the countries in West Africa and Central Africa, all the French-speaking countries from Central Africa.
Okay.
So it covered countries from Rwanda, Burundi, all the way to, I believe, to Mauritania in the western part
Okay.
of Africa. I think the General Conference realized that it may be more efficient to keep the countries that are geographically closer to each other within the same division. And the work was growing. So it was also not just efficiency of mission, but the work is growing, the membership is growing, the mission needs more efforts, more structure. So I think that's the reason why they chose to
Realignment.
realign the division territories.
So now we have West Central Africa, East Central Africa, and Southern Africa, Indian Ocean.
Correct.
And then Middle East, North Africa
Correct.
at the top, which is a union mission, not a division.
Yes.
I've actually always been very impressed with the work in ECD. Even today, we just had Hope for Africa that took place, and I know that they have this big homecoming event that's going to be happening in 2024.
Absolutely.
You all think very big in ECD, it seems like. Was that what it was like when it got started?
Yes, it was very vibrant when it started. But first of all, there was the work of organizing the division. It was a new division. The other two divisions remained at the previous headquarters. So the Southern Africa Indian Ocean Division remained with its headquarters in Harare, Zimbabwe. Of course, they later moved to Pretoria, South Africa. The West Central Africa Division remained in Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire. The East Central Africa Division needed to start from scratch. So to say. So I mentioned earlier that I was involved in looking for property allocation where the division could be established. And we found this land that was right next to Maxwell Adventist Academy.
Okay.
And procured the property, and the division was established there. So there was that work that took some time, about 2 years, to just design the new division headquarters and build the facilities and relocate from the office in Nairobi to this location that was in the outskirts of the city. But besides that, there was the mission. The church in East Central Africa Division is very vibrant. The church in Kenya, where the division is headquartered, is very, very vibrant. So it has grown. There's a lot of energy. You mentioned Hope for Africa. We as Hope Channel had the privilege of sponsoring and supporting this event. And there's been a big harvest, many souls being brought into the kingdom. So, mission is at the forefront, and there's much more potential for growth.
So you're serving now at the division.
Correct.
As an associate treasurer.
Correct.
How long do you last as the associate treasurer? Because right now it seems like your trajectory is every 2 years.
Well, interesting. So I was there for 5 years.
Okay.
And during that time, the new division headquarters were established, and, that was one of the main assignments that I was working on, to design and build the new division headquarters. And they now have that beautiful compound and facilities for the division. The division was also growing, and in 2005, after the General Conference session of 2005, the treasurer who was elected to be treasurer of East Central Africa Division was not able to move or to take up that role because of a sudden illness. So we had a period of about a year when we didn't have a substantive treasurer. So I was the treasurer who was responsible for that period, which was, a broader experience. And during that time, I also worked a lot with ADRA, helping to set up their new ADRA Africa regional office in Nairobi. That was being reestablished after it had been discontinued previously. It was based in South Africa, and they had discontinued it for a time, and now they were reestablishing it in Nairobi. So I was involved in that exercise. I was also involved with assisting ADRA in a crisis situation that had developed in Burundi, and helping reestablish the board there, and actually served as chair of that board for some time. So I had already been associated with some work with ADRA. And so in 2006, during annual council here, they invited me to come, and during those meetings, they asked me to be vice president for finance for ADRA International.
Oh, I did not know this.
Yeah.
So you started off at ADRA before we ended up. Okay. So I was trying to figure out when you got involved in media ministry, but it wasn't. ADRA was actually the first
Absolutely.
route here. So
I moved here with my family at the beginning of 2007.
now you have basically lived your whole life in Kenya
Yes.
before coming to
Yeah.
America.
Although while I worked for the division, that division currently has 11 countries. I think at the time there were 10 countries. They just got South Sudan a few years ago. So while I worked with the division, I served in those countries, and worked a lot with the teams in those countries, the treasurers in those countries. So I had already broadened my experience beyond Kenya.
Beyond just Kenya.
Yeah, right.
But what would you say was the biggest challenge of moving? Especially, you said your family. It's your wife, you, were there children?
And my two daughters, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old were your daughters when you moved here?
So my first daughter, when we moved here, was 11 years old.
Okay.
And my younger daughter was 7 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, those are kind of hard years to move across the world.
Yes.
What would you say the biggest challenges were that you found as a family when you moved to America?
Different culture. One of the different aspects of culture that we immediately felt was the worship service. We joined Beltsville Church, and we enjoyed the services there. But at 12:15 p.m., church is done. Everybody clears the parking lot, and we have to leave.
We're done.
We're done. And we were not used to that. We were used to an all-day church where we would go and be at church the whole day, have potluck at church, have an afternoon program. And so here we are, 12:15 p.m., done with church, going home. Do we change our Sabbath clothes? What do we do? So that was kind of culture shock and a new experience, and we struggled with that a little bit. But also for the kids, they were adjusting to a new school, new system of education. They adjusted quite well, as you'd imagine, but that was also challenging.
a lot of people are like, "Oh, that must be so fun for your kid." It's actually hard on families often with the transitions. Even with us, we just transferred from Texas to Maryland. That doesn't seem like a lot, but when you involve children in it,
Yes.
if it's just you and your spouse, you can kind of work through things. But
Right.
when we start moving families, I think
Yes.
we forget the challenges that arise for them, and they can adjust to it well. But it's still, you're uprooting them from what they know
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and putting
absolutely.
them somewhere else.
Yeah.
And apparently, we don't do church all day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I must say that, the transition ministries here at the General Conference was very helpful. We adjusted, but I must say the weather was also very challenging to adjust
The
to.
weather.
We
I've,
came
I've
here.
heard that one a few times from people
Yeah,
here.
we came here during winter, and that was tough. We didn't have adequate winter clothes, so we had to adjust there. But it's all good. I think when God calls us to certain responsibilities or certain areas, like He did with with many people in the Old Testament, He equips us to adjust. He enables us to do what He wants us to do.
So, how many years did you serve with ADRA?
So I was with ADRA for 4 years, and then transitioned to Hope Channel International.
And you've been there how long?
I've been there 12 years now. It's been a great blessing to see Hope Channel International grow. At the time when I joined Hope Channel International, my first responsibility was to establish it as a separate entity with separate books of accounts from the General Conference. There was already a separate board, but Hope Channel was still functioning as a department of the General Conference. So we transitioned it to a separate entity, an institution of the General Conference. And I've seen it grow. At the time, we had just a few number of channels. I don't remember how many, maybe about 20 plus. We now have 82 channels, part of the global Hope Channel network.
I always love when I walk into Hope Channel.
Yes.
And if any of you listeners come, we give tours of the building at 10 o'clock. So when we take people to Hope Channel, I always look on Joe Sloan's door.
Yes.
And he has this, it would be like
That's,
76, and then it's
yes.
crossed out. And there's a 77
Yeah, so,
crossed out.
Yeah, it keeps growing.
So yes,
growing.
I enjoy looking to see what the latest number is every time I walk in there. So I've loved having this time with you. Thank you so much, Gideon. I have a closing question.
Yes.
For those young people who have thought about maybe working for the church, but they don't necessarily know how to get started, what to do, or maybe even for somebody who's later in their life, but they feel called to ministry and they don't know what to do. You had great clarity, it seems like, almost from the very beginning. What advice would you give to those people, though, who don't have that same clarity, but they know that God has called them to something?
That's a great question. I would advise them to do something, even in their local churches. Let them volunteer their time and efforts, their talents, to serve the church. If the Lord calls them to get involved in more substantive ways in serving their local conferences or any other entity, let them heed God's call. It's not without challenges. It's not perfect, but our God is perfect, and He works through our imperfections. I would encourage them to just follow God's leading and see where He's calling them to serve. He will enable them to do His will and help them to overcome the challenges that they encounter along the way.
Thank you so much for that, Gideon. And thank you again for taking time out of your day to come. I know that we're all busy, and accountants, there's always something to do. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of ANN Profiles with my special guest, Gideon. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast or this YouTube channel, wherever it is you're tuning in from today. We don't want you to miss any future episodes. And thank you for spending this time with us. Join me next week as I continue to get to know the life stories of more inspiring people.